Lesson 1, if you're breathing, you're winning. I could hear them saying, he's 28. It's amazing he got this far. It was September 2009, a cold night in Calgary, Alberta, and I was lying in the hospital, the Foothills Hospital. I weighed about 123 pounds. I had lost about 30 pounds that month alone. I'd had my entire rectum and half my colon removed 6 months prior in January. I could hear the doctors talking outside my hospital room about removing the rest of my large bowel and part of my small. It meant that I would have a colostomy bag for the rest of my life. A few nights later, my body stopped producing red blood cells. I started to code. The nurses came running in, moved my bed all the way to the top, and were trying to find a vein in my emaciated body of 100 and some odd 20 pounds. My body was preparing to shut down. They say near-death experiences change you. Well, I've been near death several times since I was 2 years old. For me, the first lesson death has taught me was that if you're breathing, you're winning. By the time I was 10 years old, I'd been in the hospital hundreds of times. Overnight stays where my parents couldn't be there. I spent a lot of time alone. I also spent a lot of time with other sick kids playing games, especially on games nights. But you know what? A lot of those kids that I played with never made it home. A lot of kids that went into the hospital, some don't come out. I got to go home. I was one of the lucky ones. Not many 10-year-olds get exposed to that kind of stuff. But by the time I was in grade school, I'd seen dozens of kids my age not make it home from the hospital. I was fortunate in so many ways. My family had the financial means, loving parents, loving grandparents. I grew up in an unbelievable home. My early health challenges were isolating and they were scary, but I had the support from my family that helped me pull through it. And without them, I don't know where I would be. See, everyone has challenges. Mine are health challenges. Yours might be mental health, or financial challenges, or relationship challenges. Could be family challenges. But every single one of us suffer from challenges throughout our lives. Nobody is immune to it. It's how we think and act in those challenges that matters. That's the real separator. Our actions, not our challenges, define us. Remember that. If you're breathing, you're winning. No matter how hard life gets, you're still alive. Your track record for surviving your worst days is still 100%. Lesson number 2, nobody cares about your problems. After 10 months of sailing around the world, my lung collapsed while docked in St. Helena off the coast of Africa. But that's not the interesting part of the story. Right after high school, I got selected to spend a year at sea working on a sailing vessel that sailed around the world. We started in San Diego, and then we sailed to Hawaii, and then through the South Pacific Islands, over to Australia, then over to Bali, and then around the Cape Horn of Africa. It was an incredible experience, especially after spending so much time in the hospital growing up. This was amazing. On our way to St. Helena, I contracted a fungal infection in my lung, and one of my lungs collapsed. I had to be airlifted out of St. Helena Island by a Canadian military Learjet. But while we were waiting for the airplane, I was hooked up to tubes and drugs in the hospital. I heard on the radio, they said, does anybody on the island speak French? And I told the nurse I spoke French. Within an hour in my room, I had the governor of St. Helena, I had the French ambassador, I had a couple of their militia surrounded me. They took me to the top of this mountain, and the government said, listen, we have found a stowaway aboard one of the vessels. And normally, a lot of the times, these stowaways get thrown overboard and drown. But the captain had spared this child's life. And this child from Africa who spoke French did not want to speak to the French ambassador of the island. So they came to my hospital bed and they said, you're about his age. Can you speak with this young man from Burundi about applying for political asylum in Great Britain? And I thought to myself, why me? I don't know why I was chosen that day. I don't know why God put this on me, but you know what? I was destined to do something for this kid. So for the next 2 days, they gave myself and this kid the keys to the town. My job was to convince him to apply for political asylum in Great Britain, or else they were going to send him back to Africa where he was surely going to be killed. He told me his story about how his family was killed, about how they were all shot in the Hutus in the Tutsi War, how they were all shot in front of him. And after several days of talking with him, I finally was able to convince him to apply for political asylum in Great Britain. As I stared death in the face again myself, I saw a boy from Burundi who had lost everything. Even in my condition with my health challenges, I saw that there was suffering elsewhere in the world that was far beyond anything I'd ever experienced. This story touched my heart, and I'm so glad that I got to be a part of this young man's life for the short time before I got airlifted home and had part of my lung removed. I'm not saying that nobody cares about you. My family loved me and they cared about me, but at the end of the day, they had their own problems. My dad would wake up before dawn and he would come home many days after dark. My grandpa, who owned one of the largest masonry companies in Canada, one of the hardest working guys I know, the young man in St. Helena that had lost his entire family and was fleeing genocide. I'm also not saying your problems are small. Your problems do matter. The truth is, your problems are uniquely yours to solve. You are uniquely placed on this earth to win against the problems that you have. How much time are you spending on other people's problems? There are people who get obsessed with fixing everybody else's problems because they can't face their own problems. But most of us are just trying to stand up against our own challenges in life. And God knows that we all have our own. You have to save yourself before you can save others. You have to put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others. You have to learn to be a strong swimmer before you go out and try and save someone who's drowning. If you have a heart of service, the most important thing you can do is take care of yourself first. That way, you are at your best when you take care of others. Nobody cares about your problems. Death taught me a third lesson in an even more dramatic way. Your problems are preparation for what you're here to do on earth. One day in college, I was driving home and I was pulling up in front of my house and I saw a flash of fire behind me. I got out of my car to find a man engulfed in flames, burning on my front lawn. He collapsed right in front of me, literally lying there right in front of my house. His fingers were missing, his skin was melting, his clothes were on the street in a pile, burnt. I called emergency and they told me to grab some water and put it on the bones of his finger to get him into shock. And I did that. He passed away a few weeks later. To me, I thought he was 40, 50, even 60 years old as he laid there burning. But I found out later this was a 23-year-old young man and his name was Steven, the same as mine. He had lived across the street in an abandoned building and I guess he'd been on a 3-4 day meth bender. He drank a bunch of gasoline, doused himself in it, he lit a match, and when he did, he blew his fingers off and he literally melted on my front lawn. My name, my age, right across the street. 2 different lives and 2 different endings. His challenges defeated him. I don't know what demons that man was fighting, but that's when I saw my challenges and what they were. A fight to the death. You're being prepared for your purpose in life by the challenge that you're facing. Both of my grandparents taught me an invaluable lesson. They were the shining examples of what kind of a man that I wanted to be. My grandpa Louis came from Slovenia in the 50s, right after the war. He started a masonry company and it grew to be one of the biggest masonry companies, not just in Calgary, but Western Canada. He was loved, he was energetic, and he showed me how to be a leader and what leadership was supposed to look like. My grandpa Chuck, grandpa on the farm we called him, he was one of the hardest working men I ever knew, alongside with my father. I used to go visit him and we would get up early and go feed the cows. And I got to see what being a farmer and doing chores and what real labor looked like. And I learned from him the value of hard work. I was lucky. I knew the kind of person that I wanted to be because of these men. And I had my challenges. My health challenges drove me to the edge. Like the Stephen whose life ended in fire. I was in my hospital bed, wanting the nurses some days to just pull the plug. And those exact challenges are the reason that I can do what I do today. We've grown a team of hundreds of people. We've changed thousands of lives. I've gotten to share my story on stage in Vegas in front of over 40,000 people. My challenges gave me my grit. My challenges taught me how to stay positive during tough times. They allowed me to have empathy for the struggles of other people. They drove me to pick a career that I had complete control over, that I could earn infinite income from, and that I could grow a team that wasn't reliant on me being there long term. Your challenges are preparing you. Make no mistake, you're in a fight, and you may be driven to the edge some days. But understand this, your challenges will prepare you with the skills and experiences you need to make a massive impact in your life. Which brings me to the last big lesson that death has taught me. The deaths of other young children around me when I was in the hospital. The deaths that drove the young man from Burundi to climb up an anchor 1,200 miles from home. The death of a man who shared my age and my name that ended in fire. These deaths prepared me for this last experience, my own death. For the fourth lesson, I want to read you this quote. It's a little long, so bear with me. It was written by George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, in a letter to his friend. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little cloud of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live in my privilege, I do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It's a sort of splendid torch, which I have to get hold of for the moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. Remember the story from the beginning of the video? It was September 2009. I was 123 pounds. I'd lost 30 pounds that month alone. I had my entire rectum and half my colon removed 6 months prior in January. I could hear the doctors talking outside my hospital about removing several more feet of my bowels and my intestine. It meant I was going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of my life. A few days later, my body stopped producing red blood cells. I started to code. The nurses came rushing in. They were trying to find a vein in my body, but they couldn't find one. I was emaciated. I was 120 pounds. My body was shutting down. I remember as this was happening, looking up, and it looked like the roof was gone, and it was a dark sky, and I remember these crows, these birds were flying around me, making noise. I remember looking at downtown Calgary, and it looked like downtown Calgary was on fire. I thought I was in hell. I was tired. I'd been fighting every day for 28 years. I thought that was it. My body was waiting for the decision that my heart had to make, whether I was going to keep going or not. And I remember saying a prayer in that moment. I said, God, if I survive this, things are going to be different. Frankly, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving behind an unfinished life. I was only 28 years old. When I woke up, I felt defeated. I made a journal entry that day, and I want to read it to you. Keep it positive, but the day is dark, very dark. I just want to be alone. I need some time to heal, but it's hard. It's hard having people who love you and care about you. When everybody wants to be close, I just want to be further away. Put a smile on, right? That's what people keep telling me. Just smile. Well, it's damn hard. This is one of the hardest days. Where's the light? I guess I have to find the tunnel first. But I wasn't going to give up. That's not what people do who want to be somebody. That was my turning point. And the same goes for you. If you want to survive, if you want to thrive, you have to take ownership of your story. We all have our story. You might think that I'm different than you. You might have other challenges, but you know what we all have in common? Every single one of us, we all already have what it takes to win. If you're breathing, you're winning. Nobody cares about your problems. Everybody has their own problems. Your problems are preparing you for the massive impact that you can make in life. And your life is a blazing torch that you can hand to the next generation. Be grateful for every moment. Stay alive. You aren't probably hooked to a hospital machine, but you might feel like you are on life support. Maybe your career is falling apart, your relationships are strained, or you don't feel like you have a purpose in your life. Here's what I want you to know. Your story does not end at rock bottom. It's actually where your story begins. One of the sayings we have on our team is on purpose with purpose. That's how I live every day. That's how I wish you could live every day. There are people in this world who, in response to their challenges, decide not to give up, not to quit, not to wish it were easier, and hope it will work out. These people want to be somebody. They want to leave a legacy. I decided at 2 years old, on my grandpa's knee, that I would matter to people. I decided at 14 to be somebody in my life. And on my deathbed at 28, I decided that I wanted to leave a legacy that served other people with the same values. If you're one of those people and you feel like now is the time to take a step forward and live a life on purpose, with purpose, my door is always open for you. Check our team out at www.agentholbrook.com. Learn more about us, and let's be in touch.